Hello everybody, and welcome to Theology 101. Welcome to our Friday series where we will be going over popular Bible verses that are often misapplied. I hope that this series will help you understand these passages properly so that you will know how to apply it to your lives properly. As the saying goes, a text without a context is a pretext for a proof text. In other words, if we fail to understand the context of a particular passage, then this can lead to a misapplication of that passage. Today, we will be looking at one of the most quoted Bible verses. Judge not, that you not be judged. People assume that this verse is saying that we cannot judge other people. The popular mantra is, who am I to judge? But is that what this verse means? Does this verse say that nobody has a right to judge anybody else or never confront them for doing something wrong? Let's jump in and find out. This verse comes from Jesus' most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. In this sermon, Jesus lays out his kingdom expectations for his kingdom citizens and how they are to look differently from the world. Within the middle of the sermon, Jesus brings up the topic of judgment. What does Jesus mean when he says that we are not to judge? Let's start with what Jesus is not saying. Jesus is not saying to not discern. Jesus did not say that we shouldn't look at people carefully to discern if something is right or wrong. In fact, later in the sermon, Jesus tells his disciples to beware of false teachers and to look at the fruits that come from them. Later, Jesus commands his disciples to confront people who are sinning in the church, which requires discernment. So what is Jesus saying here? He is saying not to judge people hypocritically. The verb judge is used to describe a judge who gives a final verdict on a person. But Jewish people understood that only God has authority to give a final verdict on anybody. The problem with us giving a final verdict on a person is that we don't have all the information about that person. We don't know the motives of that person. And even if that person is guilty of some sin, we don't have the right to judge them for that sin if we are also guilty of that same sin. Did you know that? This is what Jesus highlighted with the adulterous woman. He told the Pharisees that whoever is not guilty of sin should be the first one to throw a stone at her. He was not saying that only perfect people can stone another person. He was actually quoting the Old Testament law, which required that any person who was going to throw a stone for a capital punishment could not be guilty of that same sin. For example, if you witness a murder, you will not be allowed to throw a stone and executing the punishment for this person if you have ever been guilty of murder. So Jesus says that anybody who wants to throw a stone at this adulterous woman must not be guilty of adultery as well, just as the law dictates. And this is what Jesus is highlighting in this command. We don't have the right to judge others for sins that we are also guilty of. This is why Jesus adds this: for with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. The word measure refers to a scale that is used in the marketplace to weigh things. It's as if God is going to place your standard on a scale and put you on the other side of that scale to see if you even live up to your own standard. Think of those times that you complained that your coworker shouldn't be lazy at work. You're right. I'm sure you've never been lazy at work or at home, right? Ready to step on that scale? I think parents are the guiltiest of being inconsistent with their own standards. I'm telling my son something to follow every day that I don't even follow. Hey, be nice to one another and stop yelling while I'm yelling at them. So Jesus is not telling us to excuse everybody's sin. You want to know why I know this? Because he gives us specific instruction on how we are to judge people. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is the log in your own eye? Look at this illustration. A person has a speck in his eye. This word refers to sawdust. You notice this sawdust in another person's eye, and it just bothers you and you want to take it out. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But look at what Jesus adds. While you are bothered by the sawdust in that other person's eye, there is a log coming out of your own eye. The word log referred to a plank that was used as a main beam in either the floor or the roof of the building. Keep in mind that Jesus was a carpenter by trade. So he is taking the smallest form of wood, which is sawdust, and comparing it with the largest piece of wood, which was a plank. He is illustrating a scenario in which a person is completely unqualified to speak on another person's situation because he or she struggles with the same sin, but to an even greater degree. So Jesus is saying, before you can judge another person, you need to see if you are even qualified to do so. It will be like a single person giving marriage advice, or a person without kids giving parenting advice. It's not only annoying, but that person is completely unqualified to take out the speck from another person's eye. Jesus adds this: you hypocrite, First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Notice what Jesus says we must first do before we take the speck out of another person's eye. Jesus does want you to help that person and take out that speck, but before you can do so, you must remove your log so that you will have a clear vision of the problem. Then you can help that person with his or her speck. Notice what Jesus calls the person you are about to judge. Brother. If we reframed our perspective of people as family members, that will help limit hypocritical judgment. Why? Because we are not trying to criticize, we are simply helping. But before we can help, we have to make sure we are qualified to help. In this illustration, Jesus says there's only one of three hats we can wear. We can wear the judge hat. This is playing the role of God in every situation, even though we're blind to our own sins. Or we can wear the hypocrite hat. These are people who highlight other people's sin while excusing their own sin. Or we can wear the brother hat. This means that we love other people as fellow family members. We don't just point out the specks, but we only help people with their specks after we address our own logs. Can you imagine if Christians judge others the way Jesus commanded here? What if instead of condemning certain groups of people, we invite them into our lives, love them, and listen to their struggles? What if instead of gossiping about people, we approach them with grace, knowing that we also struggle with sin? Why don't we address our own logs before pointing out the specks in other people's eyes? Jesus is not saying that we should never confront people about their sins. However, keep in mind that the only reason why you are not struggling with that same sin is because of God's grace. By God's grace, some of you haven't become addicted to substances as other people. By God's grace, you haven't wrecked your marriage with sexual sins. By God's grace, you don't struggle with the same desires as other people might. But if we applied what Jesus says here, then maybe the world would not see Christians as judgmental, but as the light of the world, just as Jesus said his disciples would be. If you found this video helpful, please like and share it with a friend. Please make sure to subscribe so that you will be notified when the next video in this Friday series will be released. Until next time, see you.